Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Nineveh, the third chapter, which is the last chapter of this book. Once again, right, goes into the destruction of Nineveh as was seen or prophesied by Nahum, okay, but also the striking parallels between that and Babylon the Great. And by the time we're done with this chapter, you'll understand why, we parallelize, right, or compare Nineveh to Babylon today, or even refer to Babylon or America today as spiritual Nineveh, right? Both in how it conquered others, right, in its position, in its dominance, and in its downfall. Okay, so oftentimes, like, you may see us go to certain precepts, even in this book, and attribute it to Babylon. That's because of, even though, it was mentioned in context against ancient Nineveh, in application, right, it's inclusive of Babylon or America. And we'll see why as we go through this chapter. So this is Nahum chapter 3, verse 1. Woe to the bloody city! It is full of lies and robbery. The prey departeth not. Now, why was Nineveh known as the bloody city? Because that is exactly what it was, right? It was they were known, the Assyrians, that is, because Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. They were known for their brutality, okay? Partially because in being so brutal, it would incite fear in their adversaries to where nobody would want to fight back or revolt against them. But not only were they brutal to their those that they would conquer, right, in their lands, but also to their captives. In fact, one account here is in the book of Tobit, because Tobit was during the reign of the Assyrians, right? And there's an account why he had to bury Israelite bodies, because you had Israelites that had been, particularly the northern kingdom, that had been carried in bulk to Assyria. And there were different accounts of this, right, until the culmination of it, which was in around 720, 723, 720 BC, by started by Shalmaneser and then Sargon II. Anyway, these Assyrian kings, they were pretty brutal. Okay. Now, this is the book of Tobit. I'm just gonna, jump straight to the point. Let's see. Yeah, this is Tobit chapter 1, because Tobit was as it says, where is it? Purveyor. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, he was a purveyor to the Assyrian king at the time. Now in the Greek, the names in the Greek, don't necessarily always line up with their secular names. So you might see these names and it may sound a bit confusing when you try to match it with the timeline. But for now, we'll just refer to them as the ruler, the Assyrian ruler at the time. So when you come down here, right, it says here, and this is Tobit recounting, himself and what he's been doing. Verse 16, and in the time of Enemeser, which was an Assyrian king, I gave many alms to my brethren, and gave my bread to the hungry, and my clothes to the naked. And if I saw any of my nation dead, or cast about the walls of Nineveh, I buried him. If the king Sennacherib had slain any when he was come, and fled from Judea, I buried them privily. See? So right there it goes to show you, it says here, for in his wrath he killed many, but the bodies were not found when they were sought for of the king. And this is interesting because, in reading the book of, the book of Tobit, it didn't really stand out to me, this part, as it did now, that keeping in mind you had Israelites, particularly of the northern kingdom, that were in Assyria during the account when Sennacherib came against Judah, and the Lord had caused the angel to slay was 185,000 of his men, and then he fled. So I guess here is the other side of what ended up happening before, of course, he was slain, but what ended up happening when he returned, because he was angry. And that's why, as Tobit has mentioned here, he killed many Israelites, but the bodies weren't found because Tobit was burying them. But this is just one account, right, of how harsh and bloody and ruthless they were. As it says, full of lies and robbery. And it's going to go into that a bit about how they're, the merchants of their land were in taking advantage of others and their people and their land and stripping off their resources. The prey departeth not. The prey departeth not. The prey here are like the captives or the slaves or victims. And by them departing not, meaning within this city, they always constantly had victims. There was never a shortage of victims. And you can see how this resembles America today, right? Within this place, not only within, but also without, and how they conquer and how they come up with propaganda and go into other countries and they commit atrocious acts. Okay, and then they cover it up with a cover story and justify it. But this place is also is also known as a bloody city for similar reasons as to what ancient Nineveh was known as a bloody city. Because why was it called a bloody city? Due to its actions. Why was it known as being full of lies and robbery? Why were these things said about ancient Nineveh? They were said for the same reasons that it can be said about Babylon. It's following in the same footsteps. Continuing verse 2, it says the noise of a whip. So now he goes into the scene of them actually going down, right? And this happened was around 615 or so BC. So this is long after Sennacherib was dead and so on. You had different Assyrian kings at the time, but they started to go into a decline, right? Civil war, economic turmoil, and eventually being taken over by the coalition of the rising Neo-Babylonian Empire and the Medes, and I think the Kassites, some supporting allies. So it says here the noise of a whip and the noise of the rattling of the wheels. So this is like a scene of chariots running through the city. The rattling of the wheels and of the prancing horses. So the horses that are galloping and pretty much running, and the jumping chariots. So when you watch whether like a scene with horses that are pulling chariots and they're going really fast, if they're like either cutting a corner or they're just, jumping over an obstacle or just running, you'll see the horses dragging the chariot, but you'll see the way the chariot is moving. Sometimes it hits a little rock, it jumps up, it lands, it sways. That's the scene that's going on. Verse 3, the horseman lifteth up both the bright sword and the glittering spear. And there is a multitude of slain. Because guess what? They were killing. Under siege, having your walls broken down and being invaded. What do you think the adversary was doing in there? And you can read about this if you just look up the fall of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and you can you can read about how the battle went, and what happened to them. And a great number of carcasses, right? There were a lot of people slain, a lot of dead bodies, which is what happens in war. And there is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon their corpses. So many slain that Nahum was seeing, that you're seeing people, whether it's by chariots or just running, just like tripping over dead bodies because of how much there's going to be. And likewise, right, when this place starts to go down, both internally or mainly, like as you'll see internally, there's going to be a lot of death, a lot of turmoil, a lot of chaos. I believe in Jeremiah, it talks about the bodies being like dung upon the face of the earth. So, during this time, there were enemies running through the land with their armies, slaying people. And in this time in America, it's going to look a little different, but it's still going to culminate in a lot of dead bodies. Verse 4, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot. And their whoredoms, right, well, they were known as the well-favored harlot. Why? Because they had established themselves as a dominant power and gave off the appearance, like you see today, of being this city to be. Like Nineveh is the city, right? That's why countries all around, neighboring nations, they knew about it. They knew about its splendor and so on and so forth. But a lot of it under the scenes was through whoredoms, right? Sorceries, deception, wicked practices. Okay, to lure and attract nations into deals, and then they would realize that really it was just for them to lose their freedoms. Similar to what Antiochus did. The mistress of witchcrafts that selleth nations through her whoredoms. So by appealing, and getting into these agreements, these deals, and even just luring certain nations, they would make them subject onto themselves, right? The Assyrians here would either go into a land, give them some ridiculous ultimatum, okay, take them captive, all right, sell their people. And that's how they constantly had merchants within them, because the merchants were buying slaves, they were buying, uh, a bulk of things. But back then, slaves were like a very known thing. Once again, as we keep reading, it'll go into that. And families through her witchcrafts. And similarly, that's what you see going on here, right? Both in the sense of actual literal people and sorceries that they use, but also through different lands. Okay, so when you look at how they do it through witchcrafts, a big form of witchcraft is deception. Okay, and sorcery. When you enchant somebody, you put them under a certain perspective or a spell, so to speak, to where they don't see reality for what it is. They see it through the lens that you've provided them. So what they do to people, both American people, I'm drawing the parallel now. American people and people around the world is they push out deceptive information. They use propaganda. They demonize to paint a picture that they are justified in taking whatever action they're going to take. And in doing so, they can go and invade a foreign country, a sovereign country, under the a guise of either some propaganda that they've come up with, or some means that they've done, right? Both playing the left hand and the right hand, to say, ha, see, we were right. This is why we got to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, and through that, they'll go in there, they'll cause this chaos. They'll take advantage of the people over there, uproot the actual rulers of the land and set up puppet rulers. And then they'll have this underground trades and so on and so forth going in if the land has resources. So outwardly, it looks like, oh, this land was liberated from rebels or from this like tyrant ruler, but behind the scenes, there's now a network between that land and Babylon, and you have things that are happening like on the level of high level witchcraft, where you have children and women and people going missing. Meanwhile, they're being funneled into some as to be used as sacrifices, or to have their organs trafficked, because that's a lot of money that they make through that. So there's a whole lot that goes on underground that you don't see. When they take interest in a particular country or people or a certain group, and they go in there, it's more than just what you see on the news. It's more than just what it looks like on the war front. Those nations that get taken over have to abide by a certain contract. If they tell those nations, which Kissinger was very good at it, he would persuade them through ultimatums that they couldn't turn down, to say, yo, your population is too much. You got to start decreasing it, promote more contraceptives, increase death rates, decrease birth rates. And if you don't do it, we'll come in there, we'll set up a civil war, and then we'll have the population go down that way. And all these things are through deceptive means, through witchcraft, through sorceries. But that's what they do. Okay, and similarly, in their ancient world version, Nineveh was practicing this. Because For all these heathen empires and rulerships, in order to come up into that position, there was whenever you're a major empire like that, there's always usually some secret society or some esoteric group behind the scenes that's pulling the strings. Verse 5, behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts. I will discover thy skirt upon thy face. And the Lord showed them that he was against them by first sending Jonah to prophesy against them. Right? And it says, I will discover thy skirts upon thy face. To discover your skirt upon your face is to lift up your skirt, right? Like a woman who has a dress or a skirt and it gets lifted up to her head. And then basically everything under is exposed. And I will shew the nations thy nakedness. So what's under that skirt? And the kingdoms thy shame, right? It's a shame because you're embarrassed, right? When that part of you is exposed. And what this means on a national level, because nations don't wear skirts, but what this means is they will be exposed, right, for what's really going on within. So when you look at what was happening in ancient Nineveh, it wasn't until they started to weaken, you started to have civil wars, you started to have economic decline, you started to have dark periods, that it was now starting to become more apparent, both to those that wanted to find a good time to revolt, and to the nations that looked at it as this glorious, kingdom that could never go down. That shame was uncovered, and they could see it for what it really was, to say, damn, so this is what it's really like this is what's really going on in there. And similarly, as if you look at America, there was a period in time where, people would look at it and look, they would think the American dream, right? They would think, yo, this place is like heaven on earth. But through different events and different things going on, and now the use of like social media and information being spread, people are seeing what's really going on here. And they're like, yo, it's still the talk of the town, but for the different reason. Verse 6, and I will cast abominable filth upon thee, and make thee vile, and will set thee as a gazing stock, right? Which was when abominable filth or dirt was cast upon you, was a sign of disrespect. Okay, and what the Lord did, obviously, he didn't grab actual filth and just like put it upon them, but the effect that one is in being under this condition was that same effect. The Lord caused that to happen by having them be taken down or be taken over. As it says, and I will set thee as a gazing stock, meaning that the known world at the time was going to witness this. And they were going to see, damn, this place ain't, it's not what we used to think it was. And it shall come to pass that all they that look upon thee shall flee from thee, and say, Nineveh is laid waste. So as they see it going down, they see it, being besieged, right? They see the armies being destroyed. They're gonna know, yo, this place is not gonna stand. This one so great a kingdom, a capital is falling, and they're gonna what? They're gonna flee. Just like it says in Isaiah 13 that when this place starts going down, like when America starts going down, people are gonna flee every man to his own land. The reason there's such striking parallels, which the same remains true for even other empires that came after. If they followed the same footsteps, as the saying goes, history repeats itself, and there's nothing new under the sun. If they followed the same footsteps, when the Lord started to take them down, you would see it in a similar manner, right? This is what happens when an empire starts to go down. Those that can flee will flee, just like the Titanic. When they saw the Titanic, everybody wanted to jump on the Titanic, but when it started to sink, everybody wanted to flee off of it. It's the same thing, right? This Nineveh was a great empire, right? At least in the sight of the people at the time. But once it started to go down, nobody wanted to stay there. Everybody started to flee. Same thing. Once this place starts to go down, everybody's gonna want to flee. Nobody wants to stay in a empire that's being destroyed, except for deranged, people who've Stockholm syndrome, who've been desensitized. They're gonna go down with this place. As it says, who will bemoan her? Whence shall I seek comforters for thee? Now I'm gonna pull this up in another translation. Yeah, okay, I think NLT is good. It says, all who see who see you will shrink back and say, Nineveh lies in ruins. Where are the mourners? Does anyone regret your destruction? And the answer is no. Because even though as great as a kingdom as it was, people didn't like the Assyrians, right? Like they weren't, favored because they ruled with a very iron fist. And it's the same thing. Once this place goes down, people are going to rejoice. As the saying goes, when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn, but when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, roughly paraphrasing. Verse 8, art thou better than populace? No. Now, when you go into this word here, it's referring to Thebes, right, in Egypt. I think it was in Upper Egypt. But the name there in the Hebrew, I think, is Noamun. Noamin. Let me see here. Yeah, so if we go here, it says here, I'm a one, all right, or, well, they have it here as Amun. But anyway, Ammon or Amun. And it says an Egyptian god, originally the local god of Thebes, later head of the Egyptian pantheon. So when you look at most of the other translations, they have this as Thebes. All right. Yeah, so even when you look here, the footnote says, no Ammon, that is ancient Thebes, Targum and Vulgate read Populus Alexandria. Are you any better than the city of Thebes? All right. And the reason now Nahum is saying this is because he is going to say, well, just like, and you would know, because just like you conquered Egypt, because the Assyrians did take over Egypt as well, just like you conquered them and they were helpless, right? You took their people went into captivity, they were sold, and they couldn't do anything about it. I mean, at one point, they looked like they were good. They looked like they could never go down. And yet, look at what they suffered. So the same thing is going to happen to you. You're also going to go down. You may look like you're impregnable, but those days are over. So verse 8, art thou better than populace? No, that was situate among the rivers and had the waters round about it. There were certain nations in the ancient world, which is why terrain mattered a lot. Locations like Tyre, which was off the coast, surrounded by water, gave it natural protection. Locations that had like mountains, around them, they had natural protection. And even Jerusalem, it was hard to besiege Jerusalem because not impossible, but more difficult, especially when you have to fight an uphill battle. There's a reason why there's that saying, you're fighting an uphill battle, and it's not used to describe an easy battle, right? Because having to besiege a nation that is a fortress, but it's also uphill, gives them the high ground. And you have to basically work, upward, which is more difficult. There's less room for cover and less wiggle room in that case. So, natural terrain could be a very good protection and barrier for a certain nation, as well as a resource provider. And here in Egypt, they had that, right? They had the waters about them, as it's describing here, whose rampart or fortress was the sea, because in order for a nation to get to you, if you had water as like a barrier, they had to cross that with all their armies, which was difficult, and they would lose some people. And her walls was from the sea. So as it's being said here in Nahum 3 and 8, pulling this up in the NLT, are you any better than the city of Thebes, situated on the Nile River, surrounded by water? She was protected by the river on all sides, walled in by water. Ethiopia and Egypt were her strength, right? Meaning her protection. And it was infinite, i.e. their support for it. So it was like defensed both by nature and by its allies, or the region it was in. Put and Lubim were thy helpers, right? Referring once again to Thebes. So it had allies, it had armies, it had a defense. Yet was she carried away, she went into captivity. Her young children also were dashed in pieces at the top of all the streets. Yeah, and this is literal, because when a nation during war, right, when a nation, one nation goes and has the upper hand over another, they don't care about your children. They don't care about your babies. They don't not care. They don't care about you. Okay, that's why they assault women, they kill babies, they kill men, they kill women as well, because in their eyes you're just the enemy. So having your babies thrown from the top of a building or smashed into a building somewhere, to you, it's shattering because that's your loved one. To them, it's just the babies of the enemy. So it's brutal in war for that reason, because they don't sympathize with you or look at it from your perspective. And that's what people fail to understand. And that's why this time of Jacob's trouble is going to take a lot of people by surprise, because they think that when all hell breaks loose, people are still going to have that sense of reason and, sympathy and empathy for one another. Anyway, and they cast lots for her honorable men, right? The honorable men, meaning the men in high rank, now being captives, their armies cast lots for them. Oh, I want this one. I want that one. I want that one. And all her great men were bound in chains. Remember, as we read up above, how they sold families, through their whoredoms. Verse 11, thou also shalt be drunken, thou shalt be hid. So just like Thebes in Egypt was taken, their people were sold captive, you're also going to be drunken. And to be drunken here, meaning you're going to drink of that cup. Thou shalt be hid, meaning you're going to try to hide. Thou also shalt seek strength because of the enemy. So because of the adversaries that are going to come against you and taking down your empire, you're also going to be desperate, looking for shelter, looking to strengthen your defenses. All thy strongholds shall be like fig trees with the first ripe figs. If they be shaken, they shall even fall into the mouth of the eater. And what that means is, like the fig trees, or certain trees that have fruits on them, you could shake the actual tree, right, when it's ripe, because when a fruit is ripe, it'll either fall off the tree by itself, or just a little bit of a shaking will get it to drop. So by shaking the tree, the fruits would easily drop right into the as it says, the mouth of the eater. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you just have your mouth wide open, but what it means is it would come into your possession and then you could eat it. And here, the strongholds or the defenses of Nineveh was likened onto that, meaning they were so weak and ready for the taking that it was like when you shake a fig tree and the figs come right down. That's how it would be. So the enemy would, the second they make their attack, and they come against you, your strongholds would fall right into their possession, right into their hands. Verse 13, behold, thy people in the midst of thee are women. What that means, obviously they had women in their population, but what it means is they've become weak. Like it says concerning America, that they have become, the men of Babylon have forborne to fight. They have become as women, meaning they've become weak. So as the armies of Nineveh witnessed this, they started to realize this is an overwhelming force. Because remember, this wasn't just one nation coming against Assyria. This was a coalition of the Babylonians plus the Medes, who joined forces. So that was a pretty, formidable foe to come against this empire. As it says here, the gates of thy land shall be set wide open unto thine enemies, meaning they're going to invade your land. They're going to break through your defenses. The fire shall devour thy bars. Right. So, when they break down your walls and your gates, they start to set the walls, the buildings, they set it all on fire as they're going through. Now, when it comes to the spiritual Nineveh, right, or America, the invasion is going to really be through missiles. Okay, and that fire that's going to devour these bars is going to devour both the bars, the land, and everything in it. Draw thee water. So now Nahum is being like, he's saying this in like a mocking sense, right, to Nineveh, to say, yo, draw waters for the siege, start preparing, because they coming in. Yeah, like if you imagine you're watching somebody go through a hard time, but you're in a safe position, and this person is your enemy, right? And you're like, you're seeing what's happening from all perspectives, and you're like, yeah, all right, you might want to do that, or maybe you don't want to do that, or you should probably take care of that, you know. So that's kind of like in the spirit Nahum is in. As he says, draw waters for the siege, because during the siege they cut off your supply. So water is a crucial thing to have in abundance, so you can survive the siege. Fortify thy strongholds, right? So strengthen your defenses. Go into clay and tread the mortar. Make strong the brickle. Now, what this is saying is, right, when you go into the clay or tread the mortar, this is the process of making actual bricks, right? Because they would they would do that. They would mix it with like cement and straw, and then they would let it dry, and then they would heat it up so it can become hard, and then they would use that. And during a siege, oftentimes they would try to do this as quickly as possible because majority of their walls were made of brick. So as if there's a breach, they would try to, seal up that breach as quick as possible, by having people, producing the bricks, having people sealing up the wall and basically rebuilding their defenses. And that's what Nahum is saying, right? Hurry up, fortify walls, strengthen your defenses. And he's saying it mockingly because it's going to be to no avail, right? They were going to go down. Verse 15, there shall the fire devour thee. So regardless, you're still going to get destroyed. Your kingdom is still going to go down. The sword shall cut thee off. It shall eat thee up like the cankerworm, which is locust, but in its young or beginning stages. And that's exactly that's gonna be the exact fate that happens to America as well. Now, ancient Nineveh, the fire that devoured it was through like cities being set on fire, right? And so you would have the buildings burning. Most of the flammable things would really be burning, but eventually the burning would stop, right? And you still have remains of the city. In this Nineveh or in America, the fire that's going to devour this place will not leave anything after. Okay, the fire that's going to devour this place and the sword that's going to cut this place off is going to be the nuclear missiles. And just like locusts go up in a field and tear it all up and don't really leave anything left, that's what it's going to be like once the once this place gets taken down. Just like it was like for ancient Nineveh. Make thyself many as the cankerworm. Make thyself as many as the locust. So he's saying, bring them reinforcements, right? Keep on, bring them, keep bringing them because you're going to need them. Resupply. Thou hast multiplied thy merchants above the stars of heaven. So you were being, the one of the centerpieces, right? And this like, world superpower at the time. They were also a hub or a trading center. Hence, they sold families. So, they would have a lot of merchants and sellers and buyers that would either come through their land or come to buy and sell and so on. It's kind of like today you have Wall Street, right? Or you have certain hubs that are known as, all right, like a lot of merchants, which, go by many different names today, like investors and so on and so forth. Interact with each other, or trade or deal with each other in these places of commerce. So back then, Nineveh was like that, and by multiplying merchants, meaning that you became such a popular center that there were always merchants or sellers and stuff coming through your land. It says here, the cankerworm spoileth and flieth away. So it's likening how those merchants were, right? They would show up in mass. And they would basically, strip the land of all its resources, all the goodies, and then they would go because merchants they don't stay in one place. So at one point, and this made Nineveh lucrative, right? Or it made it rich. But as it says, at one point this was you, but no more. Thy crown are as the locusts, and thy captains as the grasshoppers. And now he's saying this not more so in the sense of how large they were, but the condition that they would be in now as they're under attack, right? So it says here, which camp, so now it's describing their captains, right, and their royalty and nobility, as locusts which camp in the hedges in the cold day. So in the cold day, they go in these hiding places to avoid the cold. But when the sun ariseth, they flee away, and their place is not known where they are. So just like that behavior of locusts and grasshoppers, and how, when they're gone, they're gone. But when they're here, they're here. But just like they flee away, and then there's basically like no traces left of them, except for the crops that they've destroyed. That's how the captains and the crown were in this situation. They fled. And in actuality, when you look at the fall of Assyria, let me see if it'll actually go into that. How the ruling class actually fled. They fled from stronghold to stronghold. And I'm just hoping I can find that. But if not, that's okay too. So let's see. Let me just look it up here. Fall of Assyrian Empire, fleeing of Assyrian king. I think it was Ashur Ubalit or Ashurbanipal, or one of those two. Yeah, okay, it was Ashur Ubalit. So it says the Neo-Assyrian Empire's final collapse occurred in 609 BC, culminating years of warfare, internal strife, and the siege and fall of its capital. See, this was the lifting up of the skirt, because no longer was it looked at as this stable and place to be, because they started to see like even the people that lived there, and that's why they fled, right? The warfare, the internal strife, the economic downfall, and ultimately that siege and fall of their capital. During this period, the Assyrian kings either died in battle or fled their capitals in an effort to continue the fight, which eventually they lost. Death of King Sinsar Ishkun. The Assyrian capital Nineveh fell in 612 BC after a 3-month siege by and you see how short the siege was? Usually some sieges the siege of Samaria, I believe, was 3 years, right? So this is why when we read in Nahum, it mentioned that their strongholds were like the figs, right? That the second you shake that tree, it falls down. Because it didn't take them long to succumb to the siege. By coalition of Babylonians and Medes, King Sinsar Iskun's fate is not entirely certain, but it is widely believed he was killed while defending the city. Following the city's sacking and plundering, Nineveh was burned to the ground. And we're gonna this is also covered in Nahum 3, I think in the last verse, about the slaying. It says here, flight of King Ashur Ubalit II. Ashur Ubalit II, possibly the brother or son of Sinsar Iskun, fought his way out of the collapsing capital of Nineveh and escaped. He established a new but short-lived capital at Haran in Upper Mesopotamia. With support from an Egyptian force, he attempted to rally the remaining Assyrian army and reclaim the lost heartland. And then they lost that in Haran, and then they had to flee all the way to Carchemish, where they also lost over there. And that was the battle that Pharaoh Necho was on his way to when Josephus came out against him. I said Josephus, Josiah came out against him. So back in Nahum chapter 3, verse verse 18. So in 17, it goes into basically how their captains and their crowned, right, the rulers were going to flee, like how these grasshoppers on a sunny day, or these locusts on a sunny day, take their flight. Verse 18, thy shepherds slumber, O king of Assyria. Now, the use of shepherds here would be likened onto almost like the protectors, because when you use the analogy of shepherds and sheep in a sense of a nation, the people would be likened onto the sheep, because they depend on either the government or the military to provide for and protect them. So the shepherds slumbering here, right, meaning they were nowhere to be found. Most of them were dead. It's not necessarily like the actual literal shepherds, but those that were supposed to watch over the city or the land. O king of Assyria, thy nobles shall dwell in the dust, meaning they're going to die. We just read about one of them who was put to death. Thy people is scattered upon the mountains, and no man gathereth them. because as we read above, if I could find where it mentioned how they were going to flee. Yeah, here it is. And it shall come to pass that all they that look upon thee shall flee from thee, and say, Nineveh is laid waste. Verse 19, there is no healing of thy bruise, thy wound is grievous. Oh, and that's why they tried, right? They went from Nineveh, Nineveh. They tried to reestablish Haran. It didn't work. They fell back to Carchemish, and they ended up being taken out. And similarly, once the Lord starts to take down this place, well, let's finish it on here. It says, all that hear the bruit, which goes into the report or the announcement of thee, of what happened to you, shall clap their hands over thee. This is actually in joy. For upon whom hath not thy wickedness passed continually? So at the downfall of ancient Nineveh, like we read up above, where it mentions, where are thy mourners, right? They couldn't find anybody to mourn or bemoan her. It was because of how they ruled. That's why they were known as the bloody city. So people weren't losing their minds or mourning at the destruction or the fall of ancient Nineveh. And similarly, once America goes down, people are not going to, the only ones that are going to be, upset are the ones that were making money off of this place, the merchants. Okay, but majority of the world, they're going to be being looked at as a cancer of the earth. Once it's gone, they're not going to mourn. They're going to be afraid because the destruction is going on, but this place is cooked. Okay, and similarly, this here also applies to America, as it says, upon whom hath not thy wickedness passed continually. And that's why they're known as the hammer of the earth. So that brings us to the end of the book of Nahum, the 3rd chapter, the last book, I believe. Yeah, the last book, or the last chapter in the book of Nahum. And so you can see overall the how ancient Nineveh is symbolic or symbolizes America, or however you word that, vice versa. But you can see the parallels between the two, and why it is that we're able to apply some of these precepts over in relation to Babylon or to America. So with that, Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechak, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.